Hi, I'm Sister Vassa, and I'm having my coffee this morning before going to work today here in Vienna in Austria. It is the first week in November, and we will be reflecting on the church calendar before I go to work today. Today, let's take a look at the life of St Joannikius the Great, celebrated on November 4th. St Joannikius was born in the mid-8th century in a region called Thrace, which today is mostly Bulgaria and indicated here in yellow. He was born in a village called Marikati, not far from Apollonia, indicated here in red, on the western coast of the Black Sea. St. Joannikius was born to a poor family which could not provide him with an education. As a boy, he worked as a shepherd. He was very pious and would pray a lot as he minded the sheep. Joannikius lived at the time of the Iconoclast Byzantine emperors and bishops. That is, the emperors and bishops of Eastern Christendom who did not accept the custom of the veneration and production of holy images or icons. That means images of the saints and of Christ. There were two periods of iconoclasm, as you can see here. The first one between the years 726 and 787, which culminated in the Seventh Ecumenical Council of 787, which rejected iconoclasm. And then the second period, between the years 814 and 842, after iconoclasm was revived by Emperor Leo the Armenian. Because St. Joannikius lived a long life, his lifetime overlaps with both periods of iconoclasm. When Joannikius was a young man, the Emperor Leo IV, one of the iconoclast emperors, sent emissaries throughout the empire to draft the strongest and best-looking young men into his elite imperial guard. Because Joannikius was tall and of a strong build, and also very handsome, he was drafted and became a member of Emperor Leo's guard. Joannikius became a very well-trained and courageous soldier and fought successfully in many battles. He also became an ardent iconoclast. In fact, it says in his life that at this point even the mention of icons annoyed him. But one day, when he was passing with his platoon by Mount Olympus in Bithynia, this is now Uludağ in Bursa province, Turkey, a mountain which at the time of St. Joannikius was home to many hermitages and monasteries, a certain monk came out on the road and addressed Joannikius by name, although Joannikius had never seen him before. You see, God had revealed certain things to this monk about Joannikius. So the monk says, "Joannikius, my child, if you call yourself a Christian, why do you despise the icon of Christ?" Now, because Joannikius had never seen this monk before in his life, he was struck by the fact that the stranger knew his name, and he realized that this monk was filled with the Holy Spirit. So Joannikius fell to his knees and begged the monk for his blessing. Joannikius also immediately changed his views and became a supporter of the veneration of holy images. From then on, Joannikius also began to lead an ascetical life, although he continued to live in the imperial palace in Constantinople. For 6 years he lived like this, as both a soldier and an ascetic. Then, after a particularly difficult campaign against the Bulgars, Joannikius finally left the imperial guard and entered a monastery. Actually, he lived in several monasteries for several years, and finally took up the life of a hermit. That means he began to lead a solitary life as a recluse. In all, St. Joannikius the Great spent 70 years in ascetic deeds and received many gifts of the Holy Spirit. For more about his miracles and how he helped people throughout his life, you can read his life either online or just pick up a book and read the life. I will just add here that his favorite prayer, which he made up himself, is now used in the Orthodox Church at the end of the daily evening service called Apodipnon or Compline. This is St Joannikius' prayer. The Father is my hope, the Son is my refuge, the Holy Spirit is my protection. So that reminds us that we should also sometimes pray with our own words and not only according to the prepared texts we have in our wonderful tradition. There are many things we have left out of this story. For example, the very important and interesting theological arguments for and against the veneration of icons. But what is curious about the life of St Joannikius is that theological arguments actually played no role in changing his mind about iconoclasm. He changed his mind because he was struck by the visage of the spirit-filled monk, a stranger who knew his name. There was no argument involved. This was a communication on a different level. This is not to say that theology is not important. It is very important, because there is theological truth about God, simply because he really exists. If God were a figment of our imagination, then of course we could just make him up. Those of us who have an imagination, we could make him up according to our preferences and tastes. Having said that, the fact that theological truth exists does not mean that it is revealed to everyone at the same time, in the same way, or even to the same extent, because God meets us where we are, and that place where we are is something that actually only God knows. That is why the path of every individual to the recognition of God, to faith, is a mystery, and human attempts to force the process through religious persecution or governmental edict are presumptuous at best and tragic at worst. In the case of St Joannikius, he was an uneducated man, and theological arguments were simply not his area of competency. So theological truth was revealed to him in a way he could understand, through a voice to which he was receptive. In fact, it is very rare that we are convinced of anything through arguments alone, in case you haven't noticed. In our very polarized and polarizing political climate, we first usually have to have a willingness to hear what is being said to us, a certain openness. This openness is what Christ repeatedly calls the ears to hear, as in Mark 4:9, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." We have these ears when we love or at least respect the one speaking to us. And even in matters of faith, reaching agreement as one church, as one mind, at the end of the day requires an openness based on love. Which is why in the Byzantine liturgy, before we proclaim the creed, we are called as follows: Agapisomen allilus. Let us love one another, that with one mind we may confess. Well, that's our thought for the day and our saint of the week. St Joannikius the Great, everyone. Thank you.